All right, so I'm here with Simon Roy, legendary comic book artist. You might know him from Prophet, from Image Comics. You might know Grizz Grobus is his latest book that he's putting out through Kickstarter. And I think actually, Simon, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think Image is actually also releasing that as well.
Oh yeah, we're gonna do a soft cover next summer. It's all timed out because I want to do a couple more Kickstarters before then. So for the next
Oh, that's
big
cool.
Kickstarter,
So
yeah.
is the soft cover is going to include those next ones?
No, so basically I'm trying to I have a whole kind of half-brained scheme in mind to like put out really nice limited editions of new books through Kickstarter where I can like squeeze the maximum amount of money, but also like make the nicest object for the reader, and then like do a mass market one through Image that I don't have to pay for.
Right,
And
yeah. I will
so,
say I've said this to you privately, but I've probably said it publicly too. But like the presentation of the Grizz Grobus book, I think I think I could say definitively that it's the nicest Kickstarter comic that I've ever seen because it's an incredibly good printing that it's like has like this gold. I don't. What do you even call that? It has like a gold leaf on the side of the pages. What is that
yeah,
technically called?
leaf or foil. I'd have to double check. I think it's a foil because it's funny because
Foil.
they had different metallic coatings and like non-metallic coatings for the edges of the books. But I was just like, as a kid, whenever you see like a book with gold leaf or whatever on
No,
the
definitely, yeah.
page, you're just like, oh shit, this is an impressive book.
No, I mean it's extremely nice. I was reading it and I was like, I was already impressed, and then I realized like it has like one of those red strings like for a bookmark, and I was like, oh my god, that's like next level quality of the actual printing.
Well, it's funny too because like as even though it's for comics that I've made, it's like pretty long, but um, you could still read that in one sitting, no problem. So like having the inbuilt bookmark is again more of being like, look how fancy this book is. It might not actually be useful because there's a good chance you're just going to blast through it in one go. But
Yeah, I mean I read probably like I want to say like 50% of it in one sitting. So I see what you mean, but
but hey, that's perfect though. So you utilized
yeah, no, definitely. I did, yeah. That's how I discovered it was there. Like I didn't notice at first. Um
reluctantly preparing to like fold a page. Then you're like, oh, there's a red clip.
no, I would never do that. I'm staunchly against page folding. Typically like when I'm reading books, I will I'm not like a big bookmark guy in the sense like, oh, you have to have like a nice bookmark. I typically just have like I like tear like a piece of paper and I have that as the bookmark. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I'm a big. Well, I love reading on the John. So often there'll just be like a piece of obviously clean toilet paper in my books.
Oh,
That
interesting. I think I've done that before as well, or like a tissue.
because
But
when does a man truly have time for himself aside from when he's on the toilet?
I'm more of a toilet tweeter and not so much of a reader, but that's the
See, I might.
perfect amount of time is to make a dumb comment on Twitter in that time, but I'm not really reading so much. But
I feel like you gotta switch that and try to relax. Like I found a bunch of old Far Side, I think maybe like first edition, like the little tiny, a different format from the big Far Side collections I grew up with. But I found a bunch of the secondhand store uh, while on a trip this past summer, and now on top of my toilet, there's a bunch of beautiful
huh.
little like early '80s printings of Far Side collections, and it's just the
No, I mean
perfect amount.
yeah, it really is perfect because that's like the perfect little amount of reading, you know. It's not like something you have to be deeply absorbed in. It could just get you with the gag of the joke. Like, You could just
Exactly.
absorb the one page joke pretty much instantly. But
You're like, oh man, great. Stone Age car salesman. He's just selling rocks. Great. Oh, my shit's done. All right. Time to,
now that we mention that though, like, do you want to talk about like maybe some of the comics like you were into when you were a kid? Because for me, like Far Side, obviously that's not like, I don't even know if you could technically even call that a comic book, really, right? Because it's just like one
I think
panel. It's not
I I think it's in the same. I mean, it's still cartooning,
right.
so I think it's in the
Definitely
same.
cartoon.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's like, because I feel like it's all part of the same. Especially when you're a kid, it's like not. It's all part of the same. Like Calvin and Hobbes and
Hmm,
Spider Man and Far Side are all kind of like, as a kid,
right.
and Archie. They're all like
Yeah.
same family of story narrative communication, which I think is still true. But
Right. As a
yeah,
kid,
'cause,
you're
like,
not thinking about like, oh, is this technically under the classification of cartoon, or is this, like,
yeah. But I mean, some kids I'm sure were, but not all kids. Um, but yeah, no, because like I think when I was a kid, I read a lot of forgive the cough, a lot of like newspaper comic collections. Like obviously Calvin and Hobbes being the best of all
hmm,
newspaper comics was
hmm,
the one I read the most of. But like Far Side, tons of Bloom County, even though I never understood the jokes.
huh,
As a kid, I'd be reading Bloom County, all these Bloom counties from the '80s. There's all these references that like now looking at a few of them, I'll like I'll have inadvertently picked up a little bit more of '80s culture. But like I was only born in 1988, so like when it's like 1999 and I'm 11 years old and I'm reading a bunch of Reagan era Bloom County, where
right.
like Bill the cat becomes like a cult leader, which now I'm like, oh, that's like a reference to the Rajneesh cult. Wow, I know that
Right.
now. Netflix just made a big thing about it. But like as a kid, just being like, this is funny. I think it's absurd. I guess I just like it for that reason. You know,
Isn't there a guy in there that's kind of like a Hunter S. Thompson sort of stand-in character? Am I thinking of the right thing?
that might be Doonesbury. The
Oh, okay.
Doonesbury and Bloom County look similar,
Yeah, I'm thinking of Doonesbury, I think.
but like yeah, I don't know Doonesbury at all. For some reason, that I think that was much more political and a little less like funny animal. So
Hmm,
as a kid, harder to get into, especially as a
hmm.
Canadian kid. You know, 15 years after the fact.
Right, yeah. What other kinds of comics were you kind of raised on?
Oh, hella Archie.
Oh, interesting.
Just heaps and heaps. Well, because like when I was a kid, for a big chunk of my childhood, we lived in like this little small community where, for literally the only first 2 months that we lived in this town, is when newspaper comics were still, or rather, like Marvel comics were still being distributed to the entire mass market. So
Hmm.
like I guess I think like '97 maybe is when we moved there. It
So
was
when you
right in the
say
last,
mass market, you mean like in a
like
grocery
at the
store?
yeah, exactly. So like when I was a
Yeah.
kid, there was like we got to this new place, and then for like 2 or 3 months, they had Uncanny X-Men and Spectacular Spider-Man
Hmm.
on the shelf in the grocery store along with the magazines.
Oh, what a golden age.
Yeah, yeah, and then the old guy who ran the place sold it to a new family who stopped carrying the comics. But I also think like generally the entire I think it was moving to specialty stores at that exact moment too. So I don't know. I don't know if it was the Korean family that took over, whether it was the global comics economy,
Huh.
but so then it was just like the only comics you could get were like Archie's and like newspaper comic collections from secondhand stores and garage sales and shit like that. Or if you went to like a bigger city to visit family. Um,
So
yeah,
it
so
sounds
what
like comics were like kind of what we think of as like the standard American comic book. It sounds like that was actually kind of a little bit harder for you to even get your hands on.
oh yeah, yeah. So like
Wow.
I read a way more asterisks because it was all stuff like adults in my life had this stuff around. So like my aunt, for whatever reason, she always bought tons and tons of Archies for my cousins to read. So whenever I was visiting them, I would end up, like reading just heaps and heaps of Archies. Like what, like not even thinking like did I like them or not? It doesn't matter. I would just be reading Archies because they were there. They went down real smooth, you know.
Hmm.
And there's always a ton in the bathroom, which is probably a deep connection to why I like to read comics on the toilet.
Huh.
Is there's Archies in the bathroom there.
I never
And then,
really read Archie, but I was a big like I read these like phone book sized like Amazing Spider-Man black and white reprints. And
oh yeah, yeah.
like when John Romita started his run after Ditko left, I feel like I kind of got like I didn't know this at the time as a kid, but I feel like I kind of got like secondhand Archie a little bit because like that era where it was like Gwen Stacy and like Peter Parker and Harry Osborn and they're all in college, like, and Peter Parker suddenly becomes like no longer such a misanthropic like teenager. Now he's like kind of cool and he's like riding a motorcycle. He becomes like slightly more handsome under John Romita drawing him. And it's just like I feel like maybe I don't know. I probably am not breaking new ground here, but I feel like that was like a little bit of like Archie influence there, but I don't
It
know.
probably was. I'm trying to figure out too. There's like you read enough, like even without, like it was sometimes hard in Archie to find the credits. So like I don't I'm trying to remember the guy's name now, but you could like reading Archie's, you could recognize the artists, and like I feel like just from like a quick glimpse. I mean, like any artist really, but you're like, oh, it's this crappy Archie artist, or like, oh, it's this one incredible guy. I'm trying to find what the hell's the guy's name. It was Sam
But
something.
didn't they have a thing where they didn't even really put like credits on there for a long time?
I
Or
think
might
so. There's lots of. Oh, was it Sam Schwartz? One second. Sorry, now I'm doing the classic.
no worries. I've been tempted while we're talking to do that myself. I don't want there to be like too much clickety clacking of the keyboard though. On my end, I mean.
Maybe it is Sam. There's one. It's like you can tell he really got going in the uh, in the '70s or something, because I think that's when his art really drops. Yes,
Would you ever
Samuel.
be interested in like doing an Archie story? Because I'm just thinking they've done all this crazy stuff where it's like Archie versus the Punisher, and like, like I could just think off the top of my head, like Simon Roy, Archie, in space, like Archie meets heavy metal, like could be pretty cool. Like I'm just curious if you've ever like, is that like a dream of yours, like having been into it as a kid? Because I feel like if you reached out to them, there's a
There's a big.
non-zero chance that they would be into it.
I mean, it's not a bad idea. I've never really. I don't know, because like I've never. I wasn't a huge. I don't know, like I wasn't like drawing. I didn't spend a lot of time drawing like other people's characters. I was like, I'm
Hmm,
gonna invent my own. So
hmm.
like at one point when I was a kid, I remember it was this combination of it was like Bloom County meets The Far Side meets Veggie Tales, like the Christian
Huh, right.
CU vegetable show. And it was like, oh, I'm gonna make these one panel comics starring Bob the Grape. It was very simple to draw. And then I like, even as a little kid, I'm like, I have like 7 joke ideas and no more. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm not gonna, be a syndicated newspaper cartoonist.
So you started pretty early in terms of like drawing your own
Oh yeah,
stuff.
I've been drawing for my whole damn life. I
Hmm.
actually recently found something funny, like a drawing from. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but like you can. I don't know if they still do it, but basically it's like special paper that you can draw on with markers, and then you send it away, and it gets put onto like a plastic plate. We did that a
Oh,
lot when I was a
interesting.
kid. So I have a plate that has a drawing on it that I did in like 1993 or something like that. So like 4 or 5 or something like that. So I'm like, cool. I actually have a color drawing of like a monster or something that I drew. It's
Huh,
a tiny
that's really
baby.
cool.
So yeah, I've been doing it forever. Oh, but actually, quick quick aside, circling back to other accessible comics. Um, One of my best friends, his dad, like growing up, like from age like 6 onwards, his dad was a um, like a graphic. It was like in the city where we lived at the time. It was like there wasn't such a big glut of like designers and artists as there is now. Um, so my buddy's dad, he was an artist who also like did a lot of design work, like very much like creative jack of all trades, and he had a bunch of Asterix and Tintin comics.
Hmm.
So as a kid, we would like me and my best friend at the time would just like would constantly be reading Asterix and Tintin whenever we were at his house. Um,
Interesting. So that makes sense to me. Is like the Tintin influence. I feel like I could even see in your work today. That's an interesting one where, as an adult, as like a big time comics guy, like I've ordered a couple Tintin books, but like, as like an American, I just have like zero exposure to that. Uh to
yeah,
like Tintin.
because definitely here in Canada, there's a little like there's definitely more because a lot of people are exposed to both comics in French class because
Right.
like French is the official second language, though.
Right.
um I don't know, like probably Mandarin's spoken a lot more nowadays.
Huh.
um, but
Let's not get political here.
no, that's not political. Like it's
No, I'm
funny because
kidding. I'm kidding.
as a whole funny thing in Canada, like no matter what race or ethnicity you are, to get into certain levels of federal government here, you have to have like the language requirements. Just because it's like, even though like, only one part of the country speaks French, it's an interesting kind of like uh feature of the elite to kind of weed people out. So it's
Right.
like if you didn't
Like
go to French immersion school as a kid, you're not
I'm
gonna
exposing myself as not knowing that much about Canada, but like don't you have to know French? Like doesn't like Trudeau, like doesn't he have to know French or something? Like
Oh, as a federal apparatchik, you got it.
is it
But
like
like
legally required, or is it just like it's understood to be like if you want to have any success, you've got to know it?
if you want to get into if you want to have certain types of success in the Canadian like government apparatus, you should
Right.
probably you should probably speak French pretty good. Or like if you're a flight attendant, you got to speak French in Canada. Basically, anywhere where there's an opportunity, anywhere where you have to have the two official languages spoken, which is mainly just taking
Quebec?
Canadian airlines. Even in the Western Canada, if you're taking a Canadian airline, they're like obligated to
Hmm.
give you all the flight attendant rundowns in French as well. And sometimes they use a recording, sometimes the attendants speak it in French themselves,
Hmm.
either way. But
It's
yeah,
just
so like
interesting to me how there's these books like Tintin, like I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but like because he's French, I kind of imagine there's a bit of like there's more like Mobius influence up there, but that could just be my imagination. But it's
I
just
think
interesting how it's like Canada is like almost like a European country in a way, especially with the access, like you said, like Asterix, like like I have like zero exposure to that, because it just like was
yeah.
not available as a kid, wasn't available. I'm sure everything is available. Like you could get anything, but it wasn't like in the culture like I imagine it was more in Canada or whatever.
Well, I think too, because like there's a lot of I don't know, like yeah, a lot of I think around where I live on the West Coast, like a bunch of we got the deep British Empire roots and like people back in my grandfather's day and before that, people consider themselves not just Canadians, but like members of the empire.
Right.
And
I
then also
mean, you're in
culturally,
the Commonwealth, right?
exactly, along with a bunch of other countries that really don't care about it. It's really just like it's just like Australia. It's all the ethnically Anglo countries that are like, we're still the Commonwealth, and then a bunch of African ones too who are like, we'll still compete in the games. Because also, if I don't know if you know, there's Commonwealth games.
Right. Yeah.
But no, like in terms of because because the French are so close to the English in in Europe, you get a lot of you get French comics translated and sold in Britain. And so then like right, sorry to jump all around, but right now I am
No, don't worry
in the
about it.
process of rebuilding, or rather building my own Tintin and Asterix collection. Um, so like I just bought like 15 or 20 Asterix comics over the past little while, and um, there's something that's like for my whole life they've sold them in these big kind of European size um, formats. But those and Tintins are no longer being sold in that format anymore. Like
Oh,
they're not, or
interesting.
rather the Tintins are being reprinted tiny. So you can basically like in a little tiny Gris Grobus sized book, you'll have like
Huh.
3 Tintin comics all shrunk down, which is convenient, but is not like conducive to the best reading experience.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I don't know if I like that or don't like it. I mean, like I said, I don't have many of these books, but the one Tintin I have is the one where they go to the moon. I don't
Oh
know.
yeah,
That's like maybe
Destination Moon.
among one of the most classic ones, I guess. But it's yeah, it's in like a huge, it's not normal comic book size. It's much larger. And
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
in the
know.
big hero size.
Yeah, I imagine that's kind of like, I don't know. I'm not sure how much I would love if it was like shrunken down to be even smaller than like what we think of as like American comic size.
Yeah, which is kind of where they're going, I think, just to save
It's
size. But it's
cheaper.
like it is cheaper. And actually, so the I just found this out recently because I was going to there's a few comic shops in town, so I was in the one I go to the most, and I was like, "Can you order Tintins anymore?" And the guy there is just like, "No, no, they're not making new ones, or at least not in the size that you want." And I was like, "Oh, fuck!"
Hmm.
Then I go next door and thinking of Destination Moon, the Tintin book that you have, I think it's
Oh,
Destination.
yeah. Destination Moon. Yeah.
They in a bunch of bookstores in Canada. There's probably a few in the U.S., but definitely in Canada. Uh, the Tintin publisher, I guess, would sell or give out uh, big rocket-shaped spinner racks that look like the rocket from.
Oh, wow. Huh.
Um, and the store that I went to, they have one of those Tintin racks, and I looked at it, and it was just bare, and I'm like, dude, where the fuck's the Tintin? And he was just like, they're not making that size anymore.
Huh.
So now I'm currently talking to a lady on Facebook Marketplace who lives on the other side of the province, and I'm trying to convince her to mail me 18 Tintins that she has collected. Unfortunately, she's in the part of the province that's currently completely on fire. So if her house doesn't burn down, I'm gonna hopefully be able to get her to mail me a bunch of Tintins from Kelowna. But we'll see. We'll
That
see how it goes.
that rocket shaped spinner, that must be a real sight to behold. I mean, that'd be
It's
like,
beautiful.
sorry.
It's beautiful. It's just sad when it's not full of Tintin. That's right.
Yeah, no, definitely. It fits like the larger size books?
Yeah, it's made for the giant
It's
French
interesting.
size.
So in terms of like more like mainstream like Marvel DC stuff or even like Image stuff, like it sounds like you didn't really, even as like a young kid, you didn't have your hands on that so much.
Not so much like in one of the places we lived. Uh, a guy a guy started a comic shop, but
Was quickly run out of town.
that did kind of
No.
happen.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
He didn't get run out of town, but he basically like he opened it in this little strip mall on the side of the highway that um, basically like a bigger store in Victoria, the main city, had collapsed, and this guy had used to work there, and he left with a bunch of the back stock, which was like the that was his like original big like quarter comics bins that he had, which was really sick. So like in high school, we would walk down to a store and um, I bought a ton of like early '90s Image stuff um, through there, and
Hmm.
like surprised at how much of it was really bad. Like I remember
Hmm.
buying I don't know, I don't want to name too many names actually, but I just remember reading a bunch of actually I remember even reading a Prophet from
Yeah, I
early
was about
90s
to
and being
ask, did you read any of those prophets?
I think I remember buying a few of them like Shadowhawk and a few of those and just really it was actually a funny turning point like when I started to get serious about like doing I don't know Western style comics it's because like I'd grown up always reading these kind of narrative you know different types of comics and then actually reading a bunch of Western comics I was like wow these are fucking shit I can easily I can at least do this well you know because like oh man there's so many and like even new books I remember when Image always had when I was a kid I would always go on the Image site where they had like the free preview issues up and some would be generally good but then there'd also be ones where it'd be like incredible artwork and it's just completely terrible story and I was like I don't even think I can write but maybe I could do better than this guy like so I don't know an inflated sense of ego as like a weird introverted kid I think.
I think that's how it starts for a lot of people though, where it's like, I could do this, like at least as good as this, probably a lot
Well, I think
better.
yeah
Like
because everybody's making
I think that's like a good and natural part of the process of becoming like a artist or a writer. That's like, it's almost like I'm like in an exhilarating moment where it's like, I could do this. Like, why not me?
yeah exactly if this crap can get made why couldn't I also make crap.
Right, yeah. I mean, and there's also a part of it that's like, you're learning like and then when you actually try to do it, it's like, yeah, it's like not so easy. You know what I mean? You're kind of learning like,
Exactly.
you know, the things you thought were like, oh, I'm easily going to do a million times better than that. Like when you make your first fledgling steps, like you're seeing like, oh, well, actually, you're not even close to the things you thought you were just going to blow out of the water, you know?
Oh, totally. Because like, man, I remember in university trying to like, I was not confident with any writing stuff. So I was like trying to get friends of mine who were like teenagers who were also writing. I was like, okay, you guys want to work with me on something? Let's figure it out. And uh, unfortunately, like, I was not, I was not like mentally prepared to properly collaborate because they'd be like, "Is this kind of what you mean?" They'd show me. I'd be like, "No, this is not what I meant. You didn't see into my heart already and see what I deeply wanted you to write. This is not exactly what I can't quite do myself, but I'm half imagining, like." So after like a few frustrating, stupid attempts to like force, basically being like a prototypical bad client, I'm just being like, I don't know what I want, but you're not doing it right. After doing that a couple times, I was like, maybe I should just try and write this shit myself and stop torturing people about it.
It'll never be as good in reality as it is in your head.
Oh yeah,
You know what I mean? Um, that's
that
why I
still
think
takes
it's sorry.
that still takes you off guard too.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like all you can do is just, splatter the paint, like so to speak, not literally. And, it's tough for me to accept this. It's like, I don't think we have like totally conscious control of like what the end result is going to be. You know what I mean? So it's hard where
Yeah.
you're like consciously, like preparing to make a comic, like making notes, like thinking up ideas, like fantasizing, like, thinking about it. I'm sure you have done this like literally for years. Like it's not the same as actually making a comic book. Like,
No, so
so once you actually start doing it, now this idea that you fantasized for however many months and sometimes even years, it's like it's coming out on the paper and it's like not this perfect thing that you like imagined it's going to be. And for a lot of people, I think that's just, this has happened to me, of course. So for a lot of people, it's like that is like a major like stumbling block that they can't get over, because it's so frustrating to be like, well, why is this not perfect like it is in my head? And then you just kind of get discouraged by that. But I think one of the key things is just like, you have to accept that you're not like, the work is going to be as good as the work can be, and you can't be so fixated on the result, I guess. Like
Oh, that's totally
all
true.
you have a right to is the work itself. You don't have a right to like whatever rewards or whatever you're going to get for the work.
I
You
really
know?
like that idea where it's like you're entitled to finish making a thing, but you're not entitled to make a good one.
Yeah,
You
no,
know?
I mean, I'm basically like, I'm like, going on a rant of my own here, and I'm basically just paraphrasing. Like, I'm probably gonna butcher the pronunciation of this, but like, I'm like paraphrasing the Bhagavad Gita right now,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
just like, all you have a right to is like your actions. Like, you could get hit by a bus tomorrow. Like, you don't have a right to like the rewards of your act. You know what I'm saying? Like, all you can do is what you can do. And if you're so fixated on it's got to be perfect, like, then you'll never get anything done. Cause like, you know, it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be as good as it is in your head. So the longer you, and by the way, I suffer from this myself. So you know, I'm not trying to act like I'm some perfect angel that's never had any kind of creative difficulties, but it's very easy to just be like, as long as I don't actually do the thing, like it's perfect in my head, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's funny too because like one thing I noticed with like I know like a lot of my living is made doing like commercial art for clients, um, and a lot of the people that I know and socialize with have been people who like do storyboards and that kind of thing. And one thing that's tough for them, and also I mean it's tough for anybody, but like if you're doing creative work for pay all the time, and then you're like, okay, it's time for me to make my personal special magic project. It's even more difficult because you're not getting paid and you're putting all of yourself into it. A lot of people get really caught up on like making it perfect and like redrawing stuff endlessly in such
Right.
a way that like they never show any they never get to a place where they actually want to show it to anybody because every time they look at it they're just like it could be better instead of the whole thing of just being like well sometimes you gotta let a turd out, otherwise nothing's gonna come out at all. You know.
Yeah, definitely. And there is an aspect too where it's like the things that are like glaring flaws to you are often just going to be totally unnoticed by the average person, even not even the average person, like actual artists as well
No,
are
totally.
not
Your
necessarily.
peers will not notice the thing that you're like, oh, this glaring fuck up on this page, or this
Right,
stupid
yeah.
plot hole. Like
Eh,
someone else, they just read it and they're like, huh, I experienced that thing. That was nice. I like the drawings. You did a good job. And you're like, oh, okay, yeah. You mean you didn't notice that slight shade of green on page 37 that totally ruined the whole thing?
and in fact, like I think like often it might be something that you perceive as a flaw. Like it turns out readers were like, oh, I actually really like that shade of green. Like it's like uh you can't predict what the reaction is going to be, I guess. I mean, um
No, that's totally true.
anyway, as I talk about this stuff, I'm like, am I just saying something that's like not even profound at all? But
No, you're
um
hey, don't worry. First go around. We we got room. And also you can edit it. So, if you're
yeah,
like,
definitely.
you can be the perfectionist behind the
Any
scenes if you
anything that makes me look bad, I'm just going to edit out, and no one is going to hear these words I'm saying right now. The podcast is going to be about 5 minutes long, and just everything I'm saying is going to be like perfectly poignant.
succinct,
But
powerful.
It's called editing. As a writer, that's like, you know, uh I'm not supposed to just be saying things without like 5 or 6 editors going over every single word, making sure that's perfect. But and we'll have Chat GPT go through all of this,
Oh, of
and
course.
we'll have an AI version of my voice saying things better. But going back to like those image books and stuff, so eventually, like, you went on to do Profit, and uh if you're open to it, like, I kind of want to talk about that a little bit, because that was such a I really think that was like a watershed moment in the history of like sort of mainstream indie comics, if that's not like an oxymoron. um
I know what you mean. Yeah, like non-superhero mainstream comics.
yeah, like Image Comics, I'll throw in Dark Horse and other companies like that, like, which we consider Image Comics to be indie comics, even though, their top 5 market share, they're probably number 3, actually, right? They're
I think
third
something
market.
like that.
They've got to be, I think, third market share behind Marvel and DC, but we consider them to be indie comics. um I think Prophet was really like a watershed book in many ways, because it brought sort of, correct me if I'm wrong here, it brought sort of more of like a European sci-fi sensibility, um where you don't normally see it, which is like in American comic book stores. And it
Mhm.
had almost like, um the way it was like a team of different artists, like, like you, I'm afraid to say his name because I just know I'm gonna completely butcher it. Giannis, help
Oh
me
yeah,
out here.
I think it's pronounced Yanni Milona Yanni.
Yes, yes. And I feel bad because I just happened to be DMing with him yesterday, and he called me Jacob, and then he quickly caught himself and was like, "Oh, sorry," like, I that happens to me all the time. So, you know, I know how that could be, like, but and now I'm just messing it up again. But
I think
you
it's also
know,
to Europeans, a lot of the like Simon Roy and Seth Jacobs were like guys with two first names.
right? That's what I said to him. No, I mean, I said, like, for me, I wasn't even gonna correct him. Like, he caught it himself. Like, for me, it's like not a big deal because it happens all the time. Like, I'm supposed to have a doctor's appointment in a couple days, and I'm getting, like, those like automated texts, and they're like, "Hey, Jacob, like, just so you know, like, you have an appointment coming up." It's like, you're my doctor. Like, you're supposed to, you should know my name. But it's a totally common problem for me, so I don't really take it personally or anything. But with Profit, it just seemed like, correct me if I'm wrong here, maybe this is just something that looms large in my imagination, but it seemed like it was like a real transformative moment, because it was like this range of different artists working on the same sort of sci-fi book. Giannis, there was like Grim Wilkins. Who else was on there? I know Daniel Irizarry was in a backup story at least once. um are there other names I'm missing?
Uh, Farrell Dalrymple did
Pharaoh,
some.
yes, of course.
Yanni did a ton. Again, I'm pretty sure it's Yanni. I'm worried about it because I remember talking with him once on a Zoom on a pre-Zoom call. What was it on Skype maybe
Right.
2013 or something like that, and I'm pretty sure it was Yanni. But yeah, yeah, and Brandon Graham drew 2 issues maybe as well because it
Right.
was
Yeah. I
really
mean, uh,
he really masterminded the whole thing, and also
yeah,
like
I was just about to ask. I mean, was he basically the impetus for, like, like, Brandon is choosing the different artists here, or
oh yeah,
how exactly did it come about? Like, how did it work?
well it was mainly just him finding who he wanted to work with, and also because like one thing that he uh excelled at was just like having his ear to the frickin' his ear was on the streets. He was looking for
Right.
cool new art all the time. Always reading weird old comics from the 80s and 90s.
Right.
Um, so because like I met him at like the book launch party for my first comic in 2009, and he was like, "Hey, it's a pretty sick book." So then later on, he was, I think he might have asked James Stokoe first. I can't remember. There's something where at the end of the day, he was like, "Hey, do you want to work on a Prophet reboot? We can kind of do whatever we want." You know, Liefeld doesn't care, and I was like, "I think I'm familiar with Prophet, but can we make it like it was either his or my?" I don't remember where it came from, but definitely the idea of like Conan in space. Like
Right.
we got to do Conan in space, and then it kind of escalated from there. But a cool part of it too is like in certain issues we would have like we'd hop between different storylines using different artists,
Right.
which was both like looked was cool to read. I hope, I imagine it was, but it was also like really good for us to hit or at least get closer to hitting our deadlines
Right.
because
Like for people who haven't read Prophet, first of all, track it down. I'm sure you could get trade paperbacks on Amazon. But
oh for sure
it's basically about this guy. It takes place in a far-flung future where I'm like writing the Prophet blurb like off the top of my head, but it's
good
like a
good
guy who's like he's kind of like a super soldier, and there's like dozens and dozens of clones of him spread out across the galaxy. So what Simon is talking about here is they could show different versions of Prophet, like these different clones, and they use different artists to do that. So first of all, each Prophet would consistently be in that artist style, but also like you're saying, it allowed it to be okay. We could have this issue by Giannis, and then that allows Simon to now work on his page. It allows you to have a rotating team of artists in a way that organically makes sense with the story and is not just like, all right, now we're having a fill-in artist who's like not the guy that I'm used to and comfortable with, but like I have to tolerate this because, you know, the comics must
yeah,
flow every month.
which
So,
is definitely like
it's
most people's experience I think with that kind of thing is they're like, oh sick, I'm loving this run of books, oh shit, a fill-in artist.
who's this guy?
And even if the fill-in artist is good, it's like, well, it doesn't matter if he's good or not.
It
I
feels
want,
weird.
yeah, I'm used to this comic feeling like this, but with Prophet, it was always a little off kilter. Oh yeah, we also there was even a Ron Wimberly issue. He did one.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah, I haven't reread it, and maybe I've never reread it, but I got to look at. I have. I mean, I have all the freaking. I have all the. I have heaps of the trades here, so I should actually reread it.
Hmm.
But I don't know. It was a really. It was kind of like the ideal first job to get into comics. That like. I mean, I did. I know I did some short comics for Ed Brisson before that, but they were also like shorts for his website and for a kickstarted book that he did of crime stories.
Huh.
But
Interesting.
it was a funny thing where basically like until I got the job at Prophet, like editors wouldn't respond to my emails, kind of, or like they'd respond, but like no traction would really happen. And it wasn't
Huh.
until I had a job at Image where they're like, "Oh, someone else already approved you. Okay,
Right.
well, we'll let you in now." And I was like, "Oh, well, okay." Like that's like I didn't I'm not drawing any better than I was last year, you know? Like
Right. Yeah. There's kind of like there's an interesting thing about comics where it's um, you want it to be like
yeah,
people want to
meritocratic.
take people want to take make bets on things that are like sure things. You know what I mean?
Yes,
It's like,
yes.
oh, if you're published by Image, then it's like that somehow gives you like some kind of magical street cred where I don't know if it really means as much today, but I don't know. It's kind of like a like I feel bad saying this, but there's kind of on some level it's like a confidence game that it's like the editor needs to have confidence in you. Like, and that's more what it's about. Like, it shouldn't be about that. It should be like, is this guy's work good? Like, are people gonna want to buy it? And it shouldn't, it's just interesting. It's like, um, oh, you worked with this big name writer? Like, that kind of goes more for you than the actual work itself, I think.
I think so too. Well, and like also to be fair, I think there are many cases where, like in particular with artists, where they might like succumb to their own neurotic perfectionism or have some sort of meltdown. So I think also editors kind of they have heard
Right.
they're all familiar with like scary stories.
Right. They want to know that you're going to be reliable and
Yeah,
consistent.
they know you might shit the bed. So they're like,
Yeah. Yeah.
unless someone else has already taken a risk on you and not been burned,
Right. Right.
I don't
Yeah.
think I want to.
Yeah. In their defense, I mean, you want to see someone has something of a track record, but it's just interesting how, like, I could think of literally like a dozen people where I'm like, why is this guy should be on Spider-Man tomorrow? Like,
Oh yeah,
like this guy is a superstar, and yet like no one at Marvel or DC like knows who he is. And there's probably like 20 plus people I could think of like that. But I guess it's like that in any industry, that any creative industry, that there's people who just go unknown. But so once you were on and once you were on Profit, and Profit was like a fair, like, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but like it was a fairly big hit at the time. Like, it
yeah.
was
I think it was because everybody knew Liefeld.
right.
So and
And
everyone
then
and
Profit is so wildly different from the Profit that Liefeld did that it's like kind of a mind blower.
yeah, and I think it's basically like you get a chance to. I mean, most people never get the chance to have a weird like expectation defying exercise like that. So people are like, "What the what?" It's oh okay. What's Rob Liefeld? I mean, I'll check it out. And they're like, "Oh, it's not. Whoa, cool!" Like, which is great, but uh, yeah, there's kind of like a weird interplay of like the existing Rob Liefeld uh, reputation and street cred and all the stuff that came with his name, and
Right. And
then
we've kind of been I've kind of neglected to mention it so far, but there were other things that were also rebooted as a part of like like, I guess you could call it kind of like Liefeld's sort of like extreme
yeah,
reboot, sort of. Like, I'm struggling to think of like, what was the one that's like kind of like Wonder Woman? I can't believe I can't remember
Glory.
now. Glory, yes. There's Glory. Didn't he have I want to say Eric Larson on Supreme? Like, he brought
I
back
think he might have.
Supreme also.
I can't remember exactly, but like there were a couple. There were other ones as well, but I think all of those they were. I think part of it too is just because they were a bit more conventionally arranged, and maybe like I don't know, maybe they just didn't like get crazy enough with the underlying premise, because like the premises were like a little thin on the OG Rob Liefeld stuff because he was like 21.
Definitely. Yeah,
He was
definitely.
throwing shit out there. So Profit was nice because Brandon kind of created a space for everybody to just fuck around with and draw crazy aliens and have a good time. Whereas I would imagine with the other, well, like Glory was pretty sick, and the artist did a great job. I think Sophie Campbell.
Yes.
Uh, the art was cool for that. Um, but it was kind of kind of conventionally plotted. Okay, not that there's anything wrong with that, but kind of a standard comic setup, and not as much like a hey who's who of random aspiring comic artists who are getting brought in to draw whatever the fuck they want. You know.
I mean, I was actually writing like comic book reviews at this time. So I liked Glory like quite a bit. For, it didn't, it doesn't have as much of a legacy as Prophet, but I liked it, and I liked the Eric Larson Supreme as well. But you're right that originally these things are like, Glory and Supreme are like Wonder Woman and Superman, and there's really not much meat on the bone there. So it's
Yeah,
just,
it's kind of an uphill battle to
yeah,
take your to take a knockoff thing, and
Prophet is at
unless
least
you're Alan Moore.
like what is Prophet a knockoff of Wolverine? Maybe like
It's like half Wolverine, half half Captain America, because he's like in the OG
right,
Prophet, he was like
a
some
super
sort of
soldier.
super soldier made in Germany, but they don't talk about the Nazis. Like it was some sort of. I'd have to dig up the first issue, which I maybe don't have anymore. I can't remember, but it was a strange one for sure.
But it has
But also
enough
like
of its own DNA to be not, it's not just like, oh, Superman, it's not diet Superman. It's,
yeah, exactly.
it's not quite, it's like looking at a picture like the first cover, like I could kind of see how like he has weird hair, and I could kind of see maybe in Liefeld's head that he's like kind of like Wolverine has weird hair, like I'll kind of make my own guy that has weird hair. It's just like make weird hair in a slightly different way, like so
No, totally.
I could sort of see a bit of the Wolverine DNA there, but still it's just, it's, if the average person were to look at Prophet, they would not think, oh, that's like a Wolverine knockoff. Whereas if you look at Supreme, especially in the name, like it's a lot easier to see the Superman DNA there. But that might be part of it, that it's just different enough that it like gives you room to run. But
Well, because also too in the OG Prophet, like I've read a handful of them. I don't think I read them sequentially, but like he's fighting like I think Prophet himself might have been originally like Christian in some way.
oh
Like he
yeah, I think so.
there's
Yeah,
Bible
I'm remembering
verses,
this now.
and he was fighting some sort of androids that were servants of some bad guy. And then there's one issue that I remember Stephen, I think it was a Stephen Platt one that actually looked pretty sick, where he got plugged into a like a virtual reality thing, and like went to Vietnam in the simulation, had to fight the Viet Cong, and did a bunch of bullshit like that. And so there was like it was a pretty what existed of Prophet was like pretty all over the place. So yeah, again, as I mean, you put it succinctly, it wasn't just diet something. It was just like a crazy gumbo that we got to mess around with.
You could kind of see a little bit of the Wolverine DNA though, because like I'm looking at this now and I can see what you're saying about Stephen Platt is he's saying here Prophet feels responsible for the things that people forced him to do, even though he can't remember them. And, that's pretty similar to like Wolverine has these periods where he's just like a mindless Weapon X uh,
Yeah, yeah,
assassin. And it's kind of similar. You could also say this kind of like is like a little bit of a precursor to like, sounds similar to like Winter Soldier today. Like that's almost like
yeah.
the same thing, but obviously this predates Winter Soldier by literally like 15 years or more. But so once Prophet is coming out, you felt like then it was like you had more of a line to like editors at these bigger companies.
Yeah. So like I did a book at Dark Horse with a friend of mine called Tiger Lung, which was
Right.
caveman adventures. My buddy Jason Wordy, who um,
Talk a little bit about that. Like what was like the premise of that?
because I started working on that when I was going to art school in Calgary, and growing up on the West Coast, we get like a week of snow maybe, but Calgary, as you know, it's continental North America, so there's weather. You get minus 30 Celsius or whatever. Lots of dry snow. Um, and at the time, I was really into kind of Paleolithic um, and paleontology, like all sorts of like exploring Earth's past stuff at the time I was really into. So I started trying to wanted to figure out how to do like a fun adventure story, um, set in the Paleolithic, but in a way that like felt real and not just kind of not just generic. Which is kind of, I mean, my whole career, I'm just trying to be like, I just don't want to be generic. I want to be special. So all the stuff I'm working on, I'm trying to do like a little special, specific, real feeling simulation of something instead of, Superman light or whatever.
Hey, Seth here. So that was the first episode of Comics Without Tears, and if you want to hear the rest of my conversation with Simon Roy, subscribe to the Patreon, and you can find Simon at Simon Roy Art on X/Twitter, and subscribe to his Patreon as well, because he's posting a lot of amazing work, and you could get a first glimpse at Refugium, which is going to be his next Kickstarter. All right, see you next week.